Hello everybody and welcome or welcome back to the second shelf and to another installment of my journey to read 1001 books. The 1001 books I have to read before I die. This project, as you know if you follow my channel, was inspired by Sandy. I will leave a link to her way of doing it or her introduction video down below. And basically, these books, 1001 books you have to read before you die. And she is reading off those lists. And I thought that is a fabulous project, but I, of course, because I'm special, I wanted to have my own list because the books with these lists, they tend to be very male focused and very Western focused. So I made my own list on Goodreads with 1001 books. Some of them, of course, I included that I have already read. You can find the entire list. I will leave a link to my Goodreads shelf down below. You can have a look at all the books that I have already read, the books that I am going to read. Maybe this inspires you, and I'll pick a couple of books each month. I'm trying to read around 80 books a year now because I kind of, want to still be alive when I finish this project. So, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, first the numbers. In January, I read 5 books, but the total for 2023 is 6 because I added a book that I had already read to the list. That happens. The list is fluid. Sometimes I come across a book that I think, oh, I forgot, I have to include in the list, and then I need to bump something off the list because I will stick with the number 1001. Anyway, and the read books as of 1st of February, read and unread books, 1st of February is 553 unread books. So I still have to read 448. So that's where we start February with. I will first briefly talk about the books, the 5 books that I read. Yeah, the 5 books that I read in January. Not gonna spend much time on that because I have talked about all the books already in other videos, recent reads videos or other wrap-up videos. So I'm not gonna bore you with repetitive, lengthy talks about these books. Anyway, the first one was nonfiction, Golem Girl by Riva Lera, published by Virago. That's another thing I try to do because I can't read as many books as Steve Donahue. So I'd have to do double dips, so to speak. So this is one project. I need to read about 80 books. Well, I'm reading roughly 100, maybe 120 maximum. And I have other projects, like I want to read backlist books from Virago Press and the Feminist Press. I want to read, so I try to double dip. So this one is a Virago Press book, counts for that project, and it's also on the 1001 list. Just to give you an idea that I'm not, I'm not Steve Donahue, like I said. Anyway, so this is a memoir. Riva Lera is an artist. She's a painter, and she was born in 1958 with spina bifida, which means an open back. In this memoir, she talks about her illness, the various operations she had to undergo, and also her struggle, to find a way as an artist with that particular disability. I really, really liked it. So this was the first I finished off the list in January. Then I read the vampire book, as you know, if you follow my channel, Woman Eating by Claire Coda. A very young English writer and musician. Here is our author. And this is a book about Lydia, who is a young woman in her early 30s, and she is a vampire, as we learn early on. And she works as an intern in a very fancy gallery in London, and encounters all kinds of difficulties, especially by men. That's all I'm going to say. It's a feminist take on the vampire theme. And I really, really enjoyed it. And this is also, I tried to get this from Virago, but this is not the right edition, so it doesn't count for the Virago Press project. But I still loved it, and I can certainly recommend it. The next one was a buddy read with Adam. As always, I will leave his Instagram link down below, and we read this translated work of fiction, The Employees by Olga Raven, translated from the Danish by Martin Atkin, published in Denmark in 2018, and the English translation by New Directions in 2022. It's a sci-fi book entirely consisting of statements by employees on a spaceship. And they encounter strange objects on a certain planet that they visit, and they take these objects onto the ship, and these objects influence the behavior and the feelings of the crew. And the crew consists of humans and humanoids. So there are a lot of questions asked in this very slim little book about what it means to be human, what it means to work in a very capitalist society as an employee. I really, really enjoyed it. It's not your typical, I said that before, it made the tops in my tops and flops video last week. It's not your typical, space opera sci-fi book. If you think spaceship, space opera, no. It's very quiet, subtle, more asking questions than that there is a lot of plot. There is some plot, and there are things happening, but it's more about these the statements by these employees and asking us in our society questions. So I definitely enjoyed this one. Less of a success, unfortunately, was another translated work of fiction. I have to look up the translator, of course, Carol and Thomas Christensen, and that is from the Spanish, Laura Esquivel, Like Water for Chocolate. This is a very well-known book in Mexico. It was published in Mexico in 1989, and the English translation a couple of years later in 1995. There's also a movie. I think this is a picture of a still from the movie, set in Mexico, turn of the century, beginning of the 20th century, and we follow our main character, Tita, who is the youngest child of the matriarch, Mama Elena. She's not allowed to marry because she is supposed to take care of the mother, but she's in love with Pedro, and the plot takes off from there. There's magical realism. It just didn't work that well for me, but give it a try if it interests you. What I really loved about this book is it's in 12 segments, 12 months, even though it goes, the story is told, over more than one decade. And each month is about food, some specific food that is relevant in this month. So there's recipes and preparation of food, and I love that. I was constantly hungry when I read this book, so that was great. But the rest just didn't work as well for me. And what also didn't quite work was my first classic of the year, The Bondswoman's Narrative by Hannah Crafts, edited by Henry Louis Gates Jr. It was published in 2002, I think, or 2012. I'm not 100% sure, but it was written in 1859, but was never published then. That's another project of mine. I picked 12 classics to read this year, one a month, inviting you to join me. In February. We will read An African Farm by Olive Schreiner. The book will be mentioned in the February picks. And this one was supposedly the story of a black slave woman, her life. But I felt that it just didn't sit that well with me. The story, the way the story was told, I expected an anti-slavery book, and this wasn't it. But it certainly deserves to be on the 1001 list, so I kept it there. That's another thing. If I feel a book is really horrible, it will be bumped off the list. But I don't need a list with only 4 or 5-star books that I love. I can see the relevance, for instance, of a book like this, even though I didn't like it that much. So the list is not a 1001 books that I love, but 1001 books that I feel I need to read before I die. So I think I bumped 3 or 4 books off the list so far after I read them. But the fact that it's a 3-star read, for instance, or 2.5-star read, doesn't mean that it gets bumped off the list. Anyway, enough of the preliminaries. Here are my picks for February. The first one is a crime mystery book by Patricia Highsmith, This Sweet Sickness. As I already said, Patricia Highsmith, of course, has to be on the list, and it doesn't really matter, for me at least, which book. I could have picked The Talented Mr. Ripley or Strangers on the Train, her debut novel that was made into also a film like Talented Mr. I just picked this one. You know, it's published in 1960. It's about David Kelsey, who has a problem because the woman he loves and who loves him, he's sure of that, Annabelle, has married another guy. What to do about that? That's the story. The next one is nonfiction. My next pick for February is nonfiction. I talked about that book already, also when I hauled it, and that is Eleanor Claghorn, Unwell Women. This one was published, let me check, 2021. This book is exactly what it says on the cover, A Journey Through Medicine and Myth in a Man-Made World. So she looks at women's bodies, illnesses, how they were treated, and how women's health was looked at in a patriarchal society. I'm about not quite halfway through, and it's absolutely fascinating. And then, like I said earlier, the February pick off the list of my 12 classics is this 1883 book, Olive Schreiner, The Story of an African Farm. Olive Schreiner was a white South African author, and this is highly autobiographical about her growing up and living on a farm in South Africa. I was a bit trepidatious I'm just checking whether I had the publication date right. Yes, 1883. I was a bit trepidatious to read a book from a white South African author, but I understood that she is quite critical about the treatment of Black people in South Africa, and it is the first South African novel, or the first really big famous South African novel. So I thought I can't not put this on the list. So this will be the February pick for the classics, the 12 classics I want to read in 2023. And again, you are invited. Hopefully you want to read this with me. We can read it over the course of the month, and towards the end of the month, around the 25th, 26th, I will make a video to talk about it. So you have the whole month still to read along with me if you want to. I hope so. And otherwise, you can, of course, just watch the video. The next one is also a double dip, because together with Kim from Middle of the Book March, I have this ongoing project we started last year, and it's just a longer and quite chill project to read Irish literature by women mostly. And we have another buddy read this month, and we picked Molly Keane, Good Behavior. Molly Keane, this book was published, I'm sorry, I'm really bad with dates these days, 1981. Molly Keane was obviously an Irish writer, and this is a book by her after a 20-year hiatus of not writing after her husband died unexpectedly. And it looks at Irish high society, well-to-do society, you know, the gentry, and what's wrong with them. Basically. So I'm almost finished, 2/3 through, and so far it's really good. It's quite satirical in a way, and on the other hand also subtle. It's not in your face so much with all the things that are wrong, but I really love the writing style, and I'm glad we picked this for our Irish Lit project, and I picked it for the 1001 books I have to read before I die. Another project of mine is reading books by authors from the Global South. And because a lot of you have asked me, what does this mean, Global South? I learned this term from Sajid. He is a booktuber on a hiatus at the moment. Books on My Social Life is his handle, and he lives in the Caribbean. And I learned this word from him. I will leave a map here, because it's not so much a geographical term. So it's not like Southern Hemisphere. It is the new term for countries that we used to call developing countries or something like that. So it's now the Global South and the Global North, because that's less pejorative, I feel, than, you know, developing countries. Like, I'm a developed country and you are developing. So you want to be like, no, we just have stark economic differences, and that's mainly our fault in the White West. Not in the Wild West, but in the White West. Anyway, so these are the countries. I want to, make an effort to read from those countries, and for the beginning of the year, I picked 2, a country and a region, Caribbean and Iran. And this is a book from Iran. Women Without Men, a novel of modern Iran by Shahrnush, there's this glare, Shahrnush, can you see that? Shahrnush Parsipour. And I hope this time I will get it right. I first said translated from by another book from Iran from the Arabic, which is bullshit because it's Persia. Then I was so happy about Persia that I said translated from the Persian, which is also bullshit. It's translated from the Farsi. And the translator's name is Faruddin Farooq. The book was published in 1989, and it is about 5 women who, for various reasons, live together. So, very slim little book. And it's a triple dip because it's feminist press. And the last one is a modern classic, The Vagina Monologues by Eve Ensler. Also, this is also Virago, so a double dip, a famous feminist text from the mid-1990s that I thought I can include, and more or less also a triple dip because I'm still interested in reading feminist texts. So these are the books that I read in January and the books I picked in February. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, I'm looking forward to your comments, and I'll see you all soon in the next one.